Autumn in Boston is brief. As soon as the leaves begin to change color, cold winds blow in, and people walking the streets turn up their coat collars. Carol Williams also rewrapped her knitted scarf around her neck as she left the office building. Carol. Wait a minute. Turning around, she saw her colleague Sarah hurrying after her. She was holding a small paper bag in her hand. Congratulations on your marriage. This is a little gift from the women at the office. Carol couldn't help but smile. Sarah had been a kind senior colleague ever since Carol joined the firm 5 years ago. Thank you, Sarah. Would you please pass my thanks to everyone? Carol worked at one of Boston's most reputable law firms. Her specialty was family law, and she was particularly passionate about protecting children's rights. Her work was highly regarded within the firm, and there were even rumors of her promotion to partner. So, how are the preparations going? Only 2 weeks left, right? Sarah looked at Carol with curious eyes. To be honest, I'm a bit overwhelmed. But I'll be fine. I've got everything listed and under control. Carol gave a small laugh. Planning and composure were her trademarks. Both in her work and private life, she always looked one step ahead and approached matters with organized thinking. What about Michael? The doctor must be busy, I imagine. Yes, but he's doing his best in his own way. Last night, he stayed up late helping me check the seating arrangements. Michael Brown was a pediatrician working at Boston General Hospital. He and Carol met during volunteer work in college and were finally getting married after 7 years of dating. They were attracted to each other's sense of justice and compassion, and had built a relationship of trust over time. He's a wonderful man. You two really suit each other, Sarah said sincerely. Carol thanked her, said, and headed for the subway station. Today she had an appointment to meet her mother and sister to make final arrangements for the wedding. When she entered the cafe, her mother Betty and sister Vanessa were already seated. Betty was a woman with an elegant air about her. Since losing her husband early on, she had raised her 2 daughters single-handedly. Carol, you're late, Betty said, looking at her watch. I'm sorry, work ran late, Carol replied as she took her seat. As usual, Vanessa murmured softly. Vanessa possessed a striking vibrancy that contrasted with her sister. She worked as a model but hadn't been fortunate with major jobs, and lately had been consistently failing auditions. Despite her beautiful appearance and charming personality, she always harbored internal dissatisfaction and impatience. How are the wedding preparations? Betty asked Carol. Going well. I wanted to do a final check on the bridesmaids' dresses today. And what's my role? Vanessa asked expectantly. Carol answered with a slightly tense expression. Of course, I want you to be a bridesmaid. A bridesmaid? Not the maid of honor. Vanessa's voice contained obvious disappointment. The maid of honor is the person who serves as the bride's closest attendant. Carol explained with a somewhat troubled look. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I've already asked Jennifer. She and I have been best friends since college. Yes, your best friend. And I'm just your sister, Vanessa's words were tinged with sarcasm. Betty intervened between the two. Vanessa, stop that attitude. This is Carol's special day. Carol always comes first, doesn't she? That hasn't changed since we were kids. Vanessa picked up her bag and stood up. Just going to the restroom. After she left, Carol let out a deep sigh. Her mother placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Don't worry about it. She's just always a bit emotional. Carol nodded silently. Since childhood, Vanessa had always grown up as if hiding in her shadow. Their mother had always forced Carol to be patient, saying, "You're the big sister." Any problems? When Vanessa returned, she asked in her usual cheerful voice. Her mood swings were unpredictable. Nothing at all. Now, let's talk about the dresses, Carol smiled and changed the subject. Leaving the cafe, the three headed to the dress shop. While Carol was trying on her wedding dress in the fitting room, Vanessa and Betty were talking in hushed voices in the waiting area. Mom, why does my sister always succeed in everything? Tears glistened in Vanessa's eyes. That's not true. You have your own path too. But while I'm failing auditions, Carol is getting promoted and marrying a wonderful man. Vanessa, comparing yourself to others won't make you happy, Betty said in an admonishing tone. After finishing the fitting, Carol suggested taking a photo of the sisters. Vanessa showed a smile on the surface, but her eyes weren't smiling. That night, Carol told Michael about the day's events at his apartment. He listened to her story intently. Is everything all right with Vanessa? Michael asked with concern. It'll be fine. We'll make up as the wedding gets closer, Carol answered optimistically. She's always like this. She resists at first but eventually understands. Michael put his arm around her shoulder. I trust you. But let me know if anything's bothering you. Carol smiled and nodded. In Michael's warm embrace, she believed all problems would be resolved. However, she was still unaware that jealousy and anger toward her sister were growing day by day within Vanessa. A few days later, Vanessa found a social media post for model wanted for photo shoot. She began communicating with a man named Jason who claimed to be a photographer. In reality, Jason was an actor she had hired. In Vanessa's heart, a plan to destroy her sister's perfect life was beginning to take root. I want to make a slideshow for Carol's wedding, Vanessa told her sister on the phone one day. I'd like to collect some childhood photos. What a lovely idea. Carol responded with emotion. She took this as a sign of reconciliation with her sister. 6 months before the wedding, Carol won a major case. She had defended a couple who had suffered unfair discrimination in adoption procedures against Boston's largest corporation, protecting the rights of ordinary citizens. The verdict was published on the front page of the local newspaper with Carol's photo and reported as a victory for justice. Vanessa picked up the newspaper, staring at her sister's smiling face for a long time. She herself had just failed an audition for a catalog model for a famous brand. The words, "If you were 5 years younger," still lingered in her ears. Once again, my sister is in the spotlight. She muttered, crumpling the newspaper and throwing it away. Standing in front of the mirror, she stared at her own face. Though often said to resemble each other, Vanessa knew well that she lacked the confidence and composure seen in Carol's eyes. When she picked up her mobile phone, there was a message from her mother. Did you see Carol's article? She's my pride and joy. Want to come for dinner? Carol will be there too. Vanessa put down the phone as if throwing it. On the walls of her room hung a few photos of her modeling jobs. However, they were all for small magazines or local events. Meanwhile, Carol's social media was full of success and happiness. Her achievements as a lawyer, happy daily life with Michael, fun gatherings with friends. Why is only my sister happy? Vanessa thought, gazing out the window. I'm trying hard too. 3 months before the wedding, a Sunday lunch was held at the Montgomery house. When Carol and Michael talked about buying a new home, Betty clapped her hands with delight. How wonderful! A quiet residential area in Brookline, isn't that ideal? Yes. It's also close to the hospital, and we think it would be a good environment for children in the future, Carol said, a bit embarrassed. Vanessa drained her red wine in one gulp. I'm living alone in an apartment. Even though the rent is going up and it's tough, Carol gets to be the winner again. The table fell silent for a moment. Vanessa, stop talking like that, Betty admonished in a low voice. But it's true, isn't it? My sister is the perfect lady. Perfect job, perfect boyfriend, perfect house. Carol looked at her sister sadly. Vanessa, you have wonderful talents too. Your photographs are really... Stop it. I don't need your sympathy, Vanessa stood up from her chair, saying, I feel sick, and left the table. The three left behind were stranded in an awkward silence. Michael gently squeezed Carol's hand. She's just being a bit emotional, Betty said as if making an excuse. Everyone's feeling stressed with the wedding preparations. That night, having returned to Michael's apartment, Carol sank deeply into the sofa. Are things okay with Vanessa? Michael sat next to her and put his arm around her shoulder. We'll make up as the wedding gets closer, Carol forced a smile. She's always like this. But in the end, she understands. Michael started to say something but instead embraced Carol. He hadn't missed the anger and jealousy in her sister's eyes, but he didn't want to amplify the bride's anxiety. The following week, Vanessa found a social media post that read, "Models wanted for photoshoot, experience preferred." When she sent a message expressing interest, she received an immediate reply. It was from a man named Jason Miller who claimed to be a photographer. "I saw your photos. You have a wonderful expression. Want to talk about it?" Vanessa smiled. It had been a while since she had a job offer. However, when she met Jason at a cafe, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Actually, this isn't about ordinary photography," Jason said with a serious expression after taking a sip of coffee. "It's a special job." "Special?" "We need photos of a woman who resembles someone. Acting skills will be necessary too." Vanessa quickly calculated in her mind. This man was suspicious, but she had other thoughts surfacing. What kind of job is it? Let's say, it's like acting. Taking photos pretending to be someone else. The pay is good. Vanessa remained silent for a long time. Then, she took out her smartphone and showed a photo of Carol. "Are you looking for someone who resembles this woman?" Jason showed a surprised expression. "No, not at all, but she does look remarkably similar. Is she your sister or something?" Vanessa smiled. "Yes. This is my sister, and I want to ruin her wedding." Jason pulled back a bit, but his eyes sparkled at the amount Vanessa indicated. "That's a tough order, but tell me about your plan." The two discussed the plan for a long time. Vanessa instructed Jason to hire a male model to take photos with her dressed similarly to Carol. The plan was to stage these as if they were scenes of Carol's infidelity. "I'll show it as a surprise slideshow on the wedding day," Vanessa said, unable to contain her excitement. "I want to see the moment my sister's perfect world crumbles." As she proceeded with her plan, Vanessa began collecting childhood photos from Carol, saying, "I want to make a slideshow for the wedding." Carol was delighted, seeing this as a sign of reconciliation, and willingly cooperated. "How ironic that she's providing photos so cooperatively," Vanessa laughed alone in her room. Her plan was progressing smoothly. Jason and the male model took photos of a woman disguised to look like Carol, actually Vanessa in disguise talking intimately with a man, holding hands at a cafe, and embracing in a hotel lobby. Recent dates were added to the photos, giving the impression that Carol was being unfaithful just before her marriage. 1 week before the wedding, Carol was swamped with preparations for a major trial. Michael also had a series of emergency patients at the hospital, and both were unable to spare time for the final wedding preparations. "Vanessa, I'm sorry, but could you check the projector at the venue?" Carol asked over the phone. "I'm really sorry, but..." "It's okay, sis. I'll take care of everything. I'll test the venue's projector, so don't worry," Vanessa answered in a gentle voice. "Thank you. I'm really happy you're helping out." "I'll do anything," Vanessa's voice was honey-sweet. "I'll make your special day absolutely unforgettable." After hanging up, Vanessa checked the slideshow she had created one more time. First, sweet memories of the sisters' childhood photos. Then, suddenly inserted photos of the infidelity scene. Just imagining it made her heart race. At the rehearsal dinner, family and close friends gathered to celebrate Carol and Michael's upcoming marriage. Vanessa maintained a smile throughout, staying close to her sister, whispering, "Look forward to the surprise at tomorrow's reception." Carol was relieved by her sister's change and was about to welcome her wedding day with a happy heart. However, Michael somehow felt uncomfortable with Vanessa's behavior. He intuitively sensed that something was about to happen, but without a clear reason, he didn't want to fuel the bride's anxiety. On the wedding day, Boston in May was bathed in sunshine. The spire of St. Joseph's Church stretched toward the blue sky, and guests arrived one after another at the flower-decorated entrance. Carol was in a small side room of the church, dressed in her wedding gown. The pure white lace touched her skin gently, with a long train spreading across the floor. Next to her stood Jennifer, serving as the maid of honor, adjusting her veil. "Are you nervous?" Jennifer asked gently. Just a little, Carol smiled. But I'm happy. Really happy. The door to the preparation room opened, and Vanessa entered. She wore a lilac-colored bridesmaid dress with her hair elegantly styled. When she saw her sister, her expression hardened momentarily, but she quickly smiled. You look beautiful, sis, she approached and kissed Carol on the cheek. A perfect bride. Thank you, Vanessa, Carol took her sister's hand. I'm glad you're here. Vanessa smiled, but her eyes weren't smiling. In her heart, expectation and anxiety about what was about to happen were intermingling. The slideshow is all set, she said in a light tone. Look forward to the surprise. Thank you. I'm really happy you've been so cooperative lately. At her sister's words, Vanessa felt a momentary pang of guilt. But it quickly vanished. I've been planning it for a long time. It'll be special. The sound of the organ began to play, announcing the start of the ceremony. Betty appeared in the preparation room and teared up at the sight of her daughter. Carol, you look truly beautiful. The three bridesmaids went first, followed by Vanessa, and then Jennifer walked down the center aisle of the church. Finally, it was Carol's turn. She took a deep breath and stood before the church doors. The music changed, and the wedding march began to play. Guests stood up in unison and turned around. Carol began to walk slowly down the aisle, arm in arm with her Uncle Tom, who was standing in for her late father. At the front, Michael was waiting before the altar. When his eyes caught Carol, his expression shone with love and emotion. Carol returned his gaze with the same feelings. For this moment, the two had gone through 7 years of dating. The ceremony was conducted solemnly. When it was time to exchange vows, Carol's voice trembled slightly but was clear. Michael, too, vowed eternal love with a voice full of emotion. With this ring, I pledge my love and loyalty. When Michael's hand touched hers, Carol felt it was the happiest moment of her life. She didn't know that it would be such a short-lived happiness. After the ceremony, the bride and groom and the guests moved to a luxury hotel in Boston. More than 100 guests gathered in the grand banquet hall, overflowing with champagne and laughter. The tables were decorated with white flowers, and a banner reading, Carol and Michael, was hung on the wall. The reception host took the microphone and announced the entrance of the bride and groom. Carol and Michael entered hand in hand. They were greeted with applause and cheers. After the toast, Michael's close friend and best man, David, began his speech. He spoke warmly about the couple's journey from their first meeting to today, eliciting laughter and emotion from the venue. And I wish that these two will continue to support each other and love each other, David concluded, raising his glass. As the applause died down, the host took the microphone again. Next, a speech from the bride's sister, Vanessa. Vanessa rose gracefully and walked toward the microphone. Her movements were confident, and a smile was on her face. Carol smiled gently back at her sister. Hello everyone. I have a special message for my sister Carol, Vanessa began speaking in a soft voice. Since we were children. She paused once, looking around the room. Then, suddenly, her expression changed. But today is a special day. There's something I want everyone to know. She picked up a tablet placed on the podium and operated it toward the screen. Carol tilted her head slightly, wondering, but didn't worry particularly, thinking it was some kind of surprise. I have a surprise. Vanessa's voice rang out high. See the true nature of my sister. The screen lit up brightly, and at first, a few childhood photos of Carol and Michael were displayed. Guests smiled, and some exclaimed, "How cute," with emotion. But the next moment, the screen changed. There, photos of a woman resembling Carol talking intimately with an unknown man were displayed. In the next photo, the two were holding hands at a cafe. Further, there was also an image of them embracing in a hotel lobby. All photos showed recent dates. Dates just before the wedding to Michael. The venue fell silent in an instant. It was as if everyone had forgotten to breathe. Then, a murmur began to spread. What is this? Carol stood up, her face pale with confusion and fear. That's not me. What's going on? Michael was stunned, unable to move from his seat. His expression was unreadable. You shameless woman. A voice echoed through the hall. Betty had stood up and was shouting at Carol. To put us through such humiliation, how could you do this? The venue's murmur grew louder, relatives exchanged glances, and friends were bewildered. Everyone began talking, and voices overlapped. Mom, believe me. This is a lie. Carol desperately pleaded. Her face was wet with tears, and her voice trembled. Betty replied coldly. The photos tell it all. Carol's paternal uncle Tom sat silently, but his expression of disappointment pained her. The disappointment reflected in the eyes of someone who had loved her like a daughter for years tore her heart apart. Michael. Carol called out to her husband in a faint voice. Believe me, this isn't me. Michael slowly stood up. His face was expressionless, making it impossible to read what he was thinking. The venue fell silent again, and all eyes were on him. He began to walk slowly toward the podium. Vanessa watched him with a triumphant expression and held out the microphone to him. Tell the truth, Vanessa said in a low voice. Michael took the microphone and stood on the podium. His eyes sought Carol, and their gazes met. Carol's heart felt like it was shattering. Everything was over. The best day of her life had turned into the worst nightmare. She had been humiliated and lost trust in the worst way in front of her loved ones, family, and friends. She held back tears, preparing for the worst moment about to happen. Waiting for Michael to open his mouth, memories of their happy times raced through her mind like a flashback. The day they first met during volunteer work at university. Their first date. The bouquet he brought after his night shift at the hospital. The surprise party he threw to celebrate her winning a big case. And the day of his proposal. It's all over. Carol closed her eyes. She no longer had the courage to hear what Michael would say. Michael quietly took the microphone and looked around the venue. In the continuing silence, he took a deep breath. Carol couldn't face forward and was waiting for her fate with her head bowed. Everyone, I know you're all surprised by what we've just seen. Michael's voice, though quiet, resounded throughout the venue. Indeed, these are shocking photos, he continued. But I have a question. He looked up at the screen, staring intently at the photos displayed there. Then he looked around the venue again. I cannot believe that Carol would betray me. She is an honest and sincere person. We have built a relationship of trust over 7 years. His words caused a small stir from the venue. Carol slowly raised her face and gazed at her husband. Michael's eyes held conviction and love. Michael turned to face Vanessa. An expression of anxiety was beginning to appear on her face. Vanessa, when and where did you get these photos? Vanessa flinched for a moment but seemed to regain her confidence quickly. They were sent to me by a friend. She said she witnessed her. That's strange, Michael said calmly. Because Carol was working on a special project last month. He took out his smartphone from his pocket and connected it to the screen. The screen displayed a photo of Carol with pediatric patients at the hospital. The date was the same as the infidelity photos. Carol was helping with a volunteer project at my hospital. A special program for children. I know all of her schedules. A small commotion began to spread in the venue. Michael continued. Actually, I had these photos analyzed by an expert to verify their authenticity. He operated the screen and displayed an enlarged photo. These photos have been manipulated. Look here. The contour of the face and the angle of the body are unnatural. Experts say these are composite photos. His words caused a stir from the audience. Betty looked at Carol with a confused expression. And here is the decisive evidence. Michael displayed another photo. It showed the man from the photos talking with Vanessa. This man's name is Jason Miller. A nurse at my hospital accidentally photographed him last week. He was meeting with Vanessa. Surprised voices rose from the venue. The blood drained from Vanessa's face. That's. She stammered. Michael said, I believe in Carol. And I also know that someone is trying to damage her reputation. Carol's best friend Jennifer stood up. She said in a trembling voice. I was having lunch with Carol that day. She was with me the entire time shown in the photos. This is clearly a lie. From another table, Carol's boss also stood up. I can testify too. Carol was at the office late every day that week, preparing for an important trial. We have her attendance record. Testimonies continued one after another, and the atmosphere in the venue began to change. Carol's uncle Tom also stood up and declared, I have always believed in my niece whom I raised as if she were my own child. Michael looked directly at Vanessa. Vanessa, why did you do this? All eyes in the venue turned to Vanessa at once. She was isolated on the podium and gradually began to crumble. Perhaps unable to withstand the pressure, she suddenly broke down in tears. I wanted to be happy too. Her voice resonated painfully. It's always my sister who gets the attention. I was hidden in the shadow. Michael, you were the type of person I liked, but you chose Carol. I couldn't forgive that. The venue fell silent again. Carol looked at her sister with a confused expression, a mixture of sadness and anger. Sis, you were always perfect. At school, at work, in love. I was always compared to you. Mom too, always saying, why can't you be like Carol? At Vanessa's confession, Betty stood up with a shocked expression. Vanessa, you did such a thing. She was lost for words. Michael further enlarged the photo of Jason. This man, Jason Miller, was actually an actor. He was hired by Vanessa. And this woman in the infidelity photos. He enlarged the photo further and displayed an image processed with analysis software. This is Vanessa herself in disguise. The body type and posture characteristics match. Surprised voices rose from the venue, and Vanessa finally collapsed. She fell to her knees on the podium and said, sobbing. I planned it all. I wanted to ruin my sister's perfect wedding. Carol stood up in a daze. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had never imagined that her sister hated her this much. Michael walked over to Carol and took her hand. Then, he took the microphone again. Today is a day to celebrate love and honesty, his voice was strong. I love Carol. I believe in her. And we will continue this wedding. He looked at Carol and said quietly, I love you. No matter what. At his words, applause erupted from the venue. Betty approached her daughter and embraced her. I'm sorry, Carol. For doubting you. As a mother, I couldn't love you both equally. Carol was still trembling but gently embraced her mother back. However, her eyes were following Vanessa. Her sister was about to leave the venue, guided by staff. Vanessa. Carol's voice stopped her. The venue fell silent again. The sisters' eyes met. Why? Carol asked in a sad voice. We are sisters. Vanessa couldn't answer. She lowered her face and left the venue, escorted by staff. Michael put his arm around Carol's shoulder and nodded toward the host. The host smiled and took the microphone. Now, everyone. Today, we witnessed the triumph of love. Let's toast to this wonderful couple. Guests raised their glasses, celebrating Carol and Michael's health and happiness. However, in Carol's heart, the deep rift that had formed with her sister remained as a pain. She would never forget what happened today. But when Michael tightly grasped her hand, she regained a little courage. It would take time to repair their relationship. Perhaps it might never be fully repaired. But today was her wedding day. The beginning of a new life. Carol took a deep breath, preparing to take a step toward the future. After Vanessa fled from the venue, the reception resumed in a tense atmosphere. Carol and Michael bravely performed their first dance. While Michael led her, Carol's heart was filled with complex emotions, but supported by her husband's warm hand, she gradually regained her composure. Close friends surrounded the couple, providing support. Carol's uncle Tom took the microphone and began an emotional speech. Carol, what you experienced today is unforgivable. But seeing Michael stand up to protect you, I am truly proud. This is the real meaning of marriage. Two people believing in each other and overcoming any difficulty together. Tom's words were met with warm applause from the venue. The next day, before departing for their honeymoon, Carol and Michael had breakfast with the family. Betty approached her daughter with a dejected look. "I'm sorry for doubting you," she said in a small voice. Carol looked at her mother and said, "Mom, you were deceived too," but in her heart, she felt she couldn't completely forgive her. The unequal treatment in their parent-child relationship over many years couldn't be resolved in a day. When they were alone, Michael asked Carol, "What do you want to do about your relationship with your family?" Carol answered while looking out the window. "I want to take time to think. Family isn't just about blood ties. Trust and respect are necessary." After returning from their honeymoon, Carol received a letter from Vanessa. She held the envelope in her hand for a long time, unable to find the courage to open it. When she finally read the letter, it contained her sister's words of apology. "I was consumed by jealousy. Trying to destroy your life, I ended up destroying myself." Vanessa wrote that she had moved to another state and was receiving counseling. She concluded by saying, "We may never see each other again, but I pray for your happiness." With mixed feelings, Carol began a new life with Michael. They purchased a small house, and Carol continued her advocacy work protecting children's rights, while Michael worked at the hospital, together planning for the future. One day, Michael casually suggested, "Why don't you go see Vanessa? She made a mistake." "But she's your sister." "She tried to ruin my wedding," Carol objected. "But as a result, our bond has grown stronger," Michael said quietly. Sometimes, the worst events bring about the best results. A few months later, Carol finally made up her mind and visited the town where Vanessa lived. A tense reunion at a small cafe. Vanessa was different from before, her glamour subdued, appearing humble. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said quietly. "But I truly regret hurting you." She had begun volunteering with a local charity, teaching acting to children. "For the first time, I feel my own worth. Without comparing myself to others." Carol was surprised by her sister's change. "It will take time to repair our relationship. But today is the first step." The two didn't reach a complete reconciliation but agreed to maintain a loose relationship. They would occasionally call and meet briefly during holidays. The wounds were deep, but they seemed to be healing little by little. 1 year later, Carol and Michael held a small dinner party for their anniversary. They invited their closest friends and family to celebrate the start of a new year. Betty was also there, more subdued than before. "I invited Vanessa," Carol told Michael, and he embraced her, saying, "You are truly a strong person." The doorbell rang, and Vanessa appeared. She was holding a small gift in her arm. "Congratulations," she said quietly. Carol invited her sister in. Their relationship might never return to what it was before. However, that night, as the whole family gathered around the table, Carol thought, perhaps being a family means forgiving each other and growing together. The wounds weren't completely healed, but true family bonds can grow stronger through trials. The road ahead was long, but they had begun to walk it step by step.